What's a dark secret / questionable practice in your profession which we regular folks would know nothing about? You know, the people who write instruction manuals or user guides and things you buy? Half the time, they've never even seen or touched the product. Some dude just sends us pictures, a rough description of how it's supposed to work, and that's it. Eater, wow, this took off. To all the dudes of Reddit, I actually browse the brand specific subreddits to figure out what to add to my user guides, because that's how little info my company provides me. Thanks for making my life easier. Instruction manual writer here. Although for software, you know how there are always frequently asked questions? I have no idea what's frequently asked. I make all of them up. Young kids talk to their teachers / coaches / counselors / principals about their parents a lot. And kids pick up on all the dirty little secrets. 6 yo, I have 2 daddies. Me, that's lovely, darling. Now let's play some piano. 6 yo, one of my daddies goes on long business trips, and then mummy and I go live with my other daddy while he's gone. Me, oh, let's play some piano. Not currently my profession, but ghostwriters in fiction. John Grisham, Danielle Steele, James Patterson, Janet Ivanovich, etc. All those big names with a net bestseller every year use ghostwriters who are never credited or mentioned. It's barely even a secret. Ivanovich and Patterson don't need ghostwriters. Every book is the exact same format. It's annoying. Many hotels often sell rooms multiple times. Used to work in airport hotel, knowing that chances are some guests won't arrive due to missed or delayed flights, so we sell more rooms that we have. You have guests checking out from 2/3 am due to early flights, so even though the room is technically still fizz, you quickly and sometimes poorly clean the room and tell the arriving unexpected guest or new booking there's a random computer issue and to wait 20 minutes and then check them into the departed guest's room praying. Multiple times I've had to run a kettle under a cold tap to hide the fact the previous guest used it 15 minutes before the new guest arrives. Airlines do this chiz with airplane seats too. I once had a connecting flight while heading back to college, which was, luckily, not a long flight, and I had plenty of time. They pulled this crap and initially wanted someone to forego their seat for a $50 coupon. I let it go up to a $250 direct check and then volunteered, and they still tried to go with credit toward a ticket. I only took the check and got paid that amount for a couple hours watching Netflix in the airport. Many bills are literally written by lobbyists or special interest organizations. I have seen my boss give bill language to a state legislator and then found the same language in print a few days later several times. The bill may change in committee, but usually not drastically against the original intent. I'll second this. I wish every American knew about the American Legislative Exchange Council, ALEC, their propaganda sidekick State Policy Network, SPN, and the tremendous damage they have inflicted on our democracy. No one who has watched them in action over past 20+ years could be too surprised about Trump presidency. If anyone is interested in learning about ALEC basics, Bill Moyer's report is good. How/why overview. It has a strong bias. It's clear he's no ALEC fan, but it's spot on factually. Bill Moyer's. Sometime we learn something the day before we teach it to you. Whoa, this really hit a chord with people. Lots of shared experiences. It's great. I've had a couple teachers say they were also learning parts of a course as they were teaching it to us. Actually made me feel a little better about asking questions about the subject. Sometimes librarians read the new books before registering them in the catalog for the public. Evil after Reddit. Wow. I did not expect to get so many upvotes and comments for something I wrote randomly at lunch, but very much appreciated. Thank you, and thank you for the awards. That's the most adorable evil thing. Air traffic control. Cue the Breaking Bad jokes. A diagnosis of virtually any mental illness and a diagnosis of many physical conditions is disqualifying and will end your career. For that reason, people avoid doctors like the plague. It's like that in reactor department in the US Navy too. Undiagnosed and untreated mental illness, if it's not in your medical record, it doesn't officially exist and therefore is not a problem. Get treatment for your mental health problems. Now you're not allowed to do anything related to nuclear power anymore, and everyone hates you for not pulling your weight. That's why I didn't re-enlist. Customs broker here. Every day hundreds of thousands of containers and air shipments arrive into United States territory. The volume of customs entries entered every day is staggering. When we get licensed to be a customs broker, we are trained and tested, not just on knowledge, but ethics. We even take a pledge to partner with CBP to uphold the law and cooperate with them should we come across anything suspicious. Why so much emphasis on this? Customs can't actually screen everything coming in. I'm oversimplifying, but CBP basically works on the honor system. You file an entry saying what the shipment is, and they just take your word for it and release it. This happens hundreds of thousands of times a day. Maybe at best customs can screen 3-7% of what's coming in. The rest of just wade through. Former British customs officer here can confirm. The amount of international trade is staggering, and no government is able to do a 100% inspection on all the freight that arrives. So we rely on past history, shady customs brokers included lol, intel, etc. to target our efforts. And no, I'm not going to divulge anything more, so don't bother asking. So, yeah, smuggling happens, whether that's goods, drugs, or people. But when we do find something, expect the world to drop on your head. Government wants its revenue, boys and girls, and it doesn't like being cheated of them, or finding 30+ dead people in a shipping container, at all. Have you ever started filling out a form for a quote on something, insurance website, or literally anything, and then changed your mind and said nah, I don't want to give them my personal information, and then abandoned the form before pressing submit? If you think that stopped them from getting your personal information, it didn't. Most companies looking to capture leads will capture your info in real time as you enter it into a form. The submit button is just there to move you to the next step, not to actually send your information to the company. Yep, I filled out applications for jobs and decided I didn't want to finish/work there. Never hit next, never hit submit, although I clicked on a button on the previous page, which sent me to the next page, which was in a new window, and had my phone number, name, and address. I get an email, finish your application. The following hours, hoop-de-doo, I got a call the next few days later about the job I applied for. Yeah, no, I declined it. It was Chick-fil-A for anyone wondering. I ended up quitting a career because people, all genders and ages, kept trying to solicit me for prostitution. Young male marriage therapist. Edit. Whoa. Thanks for the upvotes. Youch. How many people who work with children, teachers, childcare workers, etc. don't follow confidentiality guidelines? Gossiping about families with cowhawkers, talking about children's home situations, creeping families' social media, etc. Any people who are supposed to follow confidentiality guidelines. Both my parents work in the penitentiary. Dad is a prison warden, mom is a secretary at the probation office. I grew up with discussions of the lives of inmates and people on probation around the table. My parents would also, discreetly, point out to me people in the street they wanted me to avoid, the sex offenders, kiddie diddlers, and druggies. I worked in a restaurant, and they told me the sweet old regular the waitresses liked so much is an absolute pervert. My dad told me he'd make holes in his pockets to touch himself. I'm sure most know this, but 99% of advertisements involving real people is acted and scripted. Even when the people being interviewed are indeed non-actors, they are prompted on what to say. For example, recently we interviewed a guy who won a car from one of our brands. First round, interviewer, congrats on your win. How do you feel? Guy, UHH. Really great. It's a real surprise, to be honest. Thank you. After several rounds and coaching, interviewer, congrats on your win. How do you feel? Guy, I feel so lucky to have won a brand car. The design and handling is first rate, and I'm most impressed by the fuel consumption. I will definitely keep on holding brand as my top car of choice. Deleted. I work in logistics/trucking/rail/ocean/air freight. Everyone lies about everything all the time. Logistics is similar to waiting on your drug dealer. I'll be there in 5 minutes. There is at least one water bottle slash soda can slash energy drink spray paint can sitting on a piece of blocking behind your drywall somewhere in your house. Edit. Wow, this took off. Thank you for your plentiful updates. This is my first comment to break 1000. My basement was never finished, and it says electrician's milk bulls in Sharpie on the wall of the foundation. At a very large pizza chain restaurant that remains widely popular, we had these perforated pans for thin crust and stuffed crust pizzas. They'd get washed in the dishwasher by the hundreds per day and at least half would still have burnt cheese and chiz on them. Well, they were just stacked to dry. When making new pizzas in those pans, sometimes the pans that were left to dry overnight grew bits of mold around the burnt cheese. We were told just to put the dough on top because otherwise we'd never keep up with the orders if we rewashed everything. The manager said, "Don't worry, it gets cooked." Oh gosh. I worked at a couple pizza places, 2 big chain ones. At one, the grease was unreal. The dishwasher basically had to be scraped once a day to get the thick film off. They didn't have an actual dishwasher either, just made the drivers clean them, and the drivers didn't want to do the dishes, so they'd just toss them in there haphazardly. I can't tell you how many times I'd find pans with a layer of oil still in them, and have to send a bunch back through. My husband worked there for a short period long after I quit. He said he caught one of the managers dipping plates in the sanitizing water and just sending them back out. Disgusting. The second big chain was all hand washed and done properly, but I think that was more specific store based than anything. You can buy stamps from your mailbox. Just leave a note and money and stamps will be there the next day. Also, if you don't have a stamp, you can leave a letter in the mail with some change taped to it, and that will pay for the stamp. Outages occur, sure. Bugs happen too. Most of the time these things are known and are put off until they happen or are complained about. No complaints equals no ticket equals not touching it. Padding paperwork, studies, to slow an auditor down. Every data point, all the minutiae of the calculations, unnecessarily dense explanations of statistical methods that go on at length with notes about distribution fitting. They, auditors, aren't usually very technical, so they stop at each spot along the way without realizing they can throw half the thing out. If you're good, you can balloon a 30-page document into 100 in a matter of minutes. Edit. I keep getting angry comments from finance people. Simmer down. This isn't about you. If you think it is, reread the post. Do you audit studies? Is distribution fitting relevant to you? Your industry does not own the term audit. Thanks. Kinda sounds like the legal system tbh. There is a problem in substance abuse treatment in the United States called body brokering. Substance abuse treatment can be very expensive and insurance companies pay a lot of money for a patient to be there. Treatment centers will hire body brokers to find addicts with the best, highest paying insurance and entice them to check into the specific center. The treatment center then gives the broker a commission from the insurance money. This can go as far as body brokers literally putting more drugs into the hands of some addicts before they come in. We see the higher level of drugs in your system upon admit, the more and longer the insurance company will pay to the treatment center. Brokers will also hire other addicts in a pyramid scheme type way to check into the treatment center, make friends with the other patients, and upon discharge, encourage relapse so they come back to treatment. I think this one wins for the most ducked up. A lot of the time the engineer you talk to about your project and decide to trust with it delegates it to cheaper contractors as soon as you sign the paperwork. Their job is new business. If not that, then we will get the cheapest and least experienced person in our team to do as much of the work as possible. I work on a popular teen TV show. All the lead actors do cocaine regularly, and they often come to set high or show up to set late because they chose to party on a Monday night. People always complain that Disney, in example, always hires old as duck people for their roles. I mean, would you hire a teenager for a show that might either have a pilot and 1 season or maybe run 4 years if it's successful? I mean, would you really? You don't remember when you were a teenager all the stupid shiz you did. Now add fame and income. When we take x-rays of your pelvis, we can see your penis. And we can see your labial folds. I was more embarrassed seeing the massive turd I was storing on those ray when the cute tech handed over my charts. Scuba instructor. We preach how important safety is to our students. When we dive for fun, and without paying customers until we get up to some very questionable chiz. This is essentially the way almost every dangerous field does, I feel like. In the professional. I've been doing this for years. I've accepted all the risks, and know exactly how, and why this stupid thing I'm doing could kill me. Do not be like me. I don't know if this is a total secret, but a lot of the talking points about how expensive lawyers are, or how plaintiffs' lawyers get unreasonably high payouts for doing little work, is driven by corporations trying to discourage people from suing them. For example, most plaintiffs' lawyers are working entirely on a contingency basis, meaning that they advance all costs with the risk of no reimbursement and don't see a dime unless they win, and almost all will give you a free consultation. But by spreading the false narrative of it's gonna cost you to even talk to a lawyer about that, big companies discourage you from even consulting one, and finding out the truth. Similarly, the narrative of plaintiffs' lawyers getting unreasonably high fees for cases is also designed to misrepresent the truth. For example, you hear a big company say this class action got $2.50 for each person, but the attorneys got $250K or something. But the only reason the attorneys got all that money is because the company went balls to the wall litigating over $2.50, racking up attorneys' fees on both sides, when they could have short-circuited the whole thing from the outset by saying you got us, here's your money, and paid next to nothing in attorneys' fees. Plus, $2.50 times a million people is a lot of money, meaning that the fees were justified by the total amount recovered, and that the case was not so insignificant to begin with. But, by controlling the narrative, companies make it seem like it's unreasonable to be mad that they stole millions from consumers, and that it's even more unreasonable for someone whose job it is to take on all the risk, and then get paid based on a percentage of what their results are. Sure, there are windfall cases, but usually those cases are needed just to offset the 10 other cases where you took a haircut on fees. It's like putting $100 in a slot machine, losing 10 times, and then hitting one jackpot on your last turn to make it back to $100, and then having the casino say he got $100 for a single game of slots. This is ridiculous until you're forced to give back $90 of what you won. How likely are you going to be to play again? There's a lot more to this, but the TLDR is that companies are projecting when they paint lawyers as greedy, and do so in order to minimize the chance that they get called on their bullshit. How expensive lawyers are. My grandma, 93 French, actually told me something that blew my mind. The reason why some higher professions, lawyers, doctors, etc., bill so much money in the US compared to Europe is simply due to the cost of education. And it's only logical. If your medical degree cost you $350K to get, you can't really survive and pay back your debt on $25 a consultation. Standard cost of a GP in France. University professor, we don't actually read your entire answer. Most of us don't. Edit. It depends on a lot of factors, and not everyone does it. I remember when I was a little kid I had this teacher who was a harder for no reason. At that age I hadn't yet become a brain-dead idiot, and was actually pretty smart academically, so I finished a test before everyone else. When I got up to turn it in she skimmed over it, and told me it needed more work and to sit back down. I just erased, and then rewrote exactly what I had written before, so I looked like I made changes, and then turned it in several minutes later. I still remember her exact words. Now this is much better. I did the work too fast, so obviously I was just being lazy, right? Stupid bitch. If it has to be accessed regularly in its setting, it's not secure. Not unless you're in an industry that actually polices it. Yes, people are dumb enough to pick up USB thumb drives they find on the ground. The nicer and newer it is, the more likely it'll get plugged in. Also, if you're looking to verify the security of your vendors, don't announce your visit. Auditing 101. Surprise Methodica. Services costs are based on how much money you look like you have. I'm a woodworker / contractor. I come to your house, you tell me what you want done. My jumping off point is how much the market will bear. If I think you can afford a $4,000 solid oak bookcase, that's what I will quote you. I can make a cheaper version that I make less money on, But why would I do that? It's not that I'm just ripping you off, I'm selling you a better product, but in doing so I make more money. So when getting a quote, it can pay to be very direct about what you want to spend, or you are going to be sold the most expensive version they think you can afford. Honest question, how likely is it that, if I give a dollar amount for a budget, someone will just quote near that amount, even if it should be a little less? Or, to use your bookcase example, if I say my budget is $3,800, would someone still offer the oak one and take less profit for themselves? Or simply quote the lower quality one at a price closer to $3,800, even if they could normally do it for, say, $3,000, since they know what I'm willing and able to spend? You do not want to know how long food sits on the loading dock before it gets into the cooler. Those periods of unrefrigerated time are taken into consideration for most items' expiration dates. I work at a theme park and we use codes with number 4 situation that could happen in the park to not create panic. We also use codes for some category of people, like a code 25 means there's a fire, code 20 is for mentally disabled people. We also use hand signals sometimes for some situations. We did that same thing in the 80s at the mart I worked at. Former retail pharmacy technician. I received many forged prescriptions for strong narcotics for otherwise seemingly young healthy patients. In hindsight, it's really sad, because I'm witnessing the opioid crisis unfold before my eyes. But the pharmacist has full discretion to pretend we don't have the drug in stock, turn people away, or straight up call the cops. We will literally put on our acting game and keep these people at the pharmacy until the cops arrive. How obvious are forged prescriptions? I don't abuse narcotics, thank God, but a TV trope is about a character stealing a doctor's prescription pad. Would you notice that? My doctor seems to just send everything over to CVS electronically, and I just give my name when I get there. The real reason programmers have so many screens is because one of them almost always has Google pulled up on it. No one knows what they are doing 100% of the time. It's typically always this should work, or well hope this works. Plus the ticket I'm working on, a few tabs of the site, maybe even a window or two with different credentials, documentation for any number of things, and the most important, Reddit. Documentary editor here. This varies depending on the content/genre, but documentaries can never be completely true. The ethics of filmmaking is disputed among many theorists. Those who work on documentaries understand that they are almost as fictional as completely made up stories. Again, this depends on the project, but some common practices like frankenbiting, splicing sentences and words to create a different message, used especially in reality TV and really dramatic docs, are necessary to making a documentary watchable. There are hundreds of hours of footage, and if you see or hear something in a documentary, the creators wanted you to be exposed to that over a different piece of footage. This can lead to lives being destroyed, whether a person is posed as the enemy or antagonist, or they are displayed in a way that does not represent them accurately, which is most, if not all, of the time. I've had to take mental health days off from working because I become so worried about how these people's lives will be affected by my decisions. Edit. Nature documentaries can be harmful as well. You know how lemmings follow each other off of cliffs and commit mass suicide? That was all faked in a documentary called White Wilderness by Disney. Lemmings aren't stupid, but this documentary has made this a commonplace fact. As far as suggestions for more factual documentaries, I honestly can't say, unless I worked on them personally. As an editor I know things that will never see the light of day, so it would be idiotic of me to say I can tell when something is left out or misconstrued. Suffice it to say that you will never know as much as the editor did, and the editor and directors will never know as much as the actual people involved. One doc that came to mind is Blind Spot, Hitler's Secretary, because it is very sparse editing wise, so it looks like raw footage that an editor would work with to edit into a more sensational film. It's been a while since I have seen it, but I think there is a part where the doc's crew lets her watch the interview and make corrections to what she says. This may be wrong though, it's been a few years. Also, I acknowledge that ums and ahs are edited out, but isn't that still a form of manipulation? I worked on a small doc that was literally just noting inventions in the state, and the amount of editing we had to do to make the older people watchable was significant, so that they sound completely different on film than they do in real life. Huge documentary fan here. I've become really disillusioned with singular narrative documentaries for exactly these reasons. Sometimes you can hear the cadence of someone's voice change mid-sentence. Sometimes plot holes become really obvious. I think this creation of narrative that has become so common on streaming service documentaries means that we are lowering the bar for quality. It's a mixed bag though, because it gives so many more people opportunity to tell their stories. Sometimes we lick artifacts to quickly determine if they are bone or pottery. Bone sticks, pottery doesn't. And then tap them on our teeth to determine if they are pottery or a rock. Rock will hurt, pottery won't. Archaeology. WTF. Licking old bones. Pretty much all the high-end handmade in Australia jewelry in Australia is made at a secret factory in Bali. All the clients have to show an established business and sign confidentiality agreements. What's an example of this sort of jewelry? Lot of unethical shipping companies even today dump a lot of garbage, oily sludge, waste, contaminated water and oil out when sailing in international waters far away from the shore. There are only a few handful players today who are actually executing business trades while still keeping the carbon footprint and environment as one of their core policies. I'm glad to be working with one of them. I'm a merchant marine who works as an engineer on mega container ships like this. Disclaimer. Link takes you to my YouTube video of a container ship in port and eventually sailing off under the Golden Gate Bridge. I remember how disgusted I was when I learned that to adhere to clean air regulations most large freighters added a device that collects their air pollution and funnels it directly into the ocean. When I worked fast food, everyone else there was a ghost hunter. They'd put together special weekends to go to haunted places around the city. Someone get this man a Netflix special. Some stores that sell used merchandise like video games and movies will pay you money for stolen stuff, even when they know it's stolen. It doesn't hurt them to get brand new games that were only released hours ago for a fraction of the cost. Then they turn around and sell them for $5 cheaper than a new copy. They are getting brand new never opened $60 games for a few bucks and making a huge profit. Knowing, witnessing, is different than being certain. No way that guy bought 20 copies of Dead Space and is turning them in unopened. Unopened product was at the time, but no longer is legal under the federal porn laws. I have been involved with over a dozen convictions as a depositioned customer. Yes, this other customer in front of me in line opened this product before entering the store and did turn it in for money. Then the camera footage and scanned it or rewards account are used to find the guy. More often than not it was a Best Buy employee from out of town stealing from their own store. Funeral director. You can buy a casket from Costco for 20% of the price that I'm going to sell you one for. About 70% of the cost of the funeral is overcharging options and leading you on to feel guilty if you don't take them. We have a lot of fun when we don't deal with customers, but we never have that fun with bodies. I had a close friend die early and we leveled with the funeral directors. Instant, I believe. He walked us through the steps so we could afford the funeral. I'm not sure how we sparked his interest, but he liked us and helped us tremendously. He was kinda creepy, but had a heart made of gold, and after I asked he just jumped into action for us, saved us tons of money. No matter how creepy the funeral director may seem, I know you'll still have a heart in there, and when that man helped us, it meant everything. Church worker here. This may be specific to the church I work for, but I think it's pretty common for bigger 1,000 plus members churches. They're two-faced. They'll tell the janitorial crew janitorial service is truly a ministry, and it's so good and so important. But guess what? When the church needs to make cutbacks, we are some of the first ones screwed over. We are the ones expected to clean until 2 to 3 AM on a Sunday morning after people have used the building until midnight. As a woman, I've straight up been harried by the guy pretty high up in the church hierarchy, and nobody really has my back. There are so many fake, judgmental, hateful people who hide behind the guise of Christianity. People who will lock people out of the building and laugh at them. They tell the people who aren't dressed presentable enough to sit in the back if that person isn't run off by their frozen, hateful stares. This is so anti what a church and Christianity should be. Edit. Yes, I know that churches are terrible isn't a secret. Also, thanks for the award. Edit 2. I just want to make it clear, I have never, do not currently, and absolutely will never attended this church. My parents go to this church and put me on the membership, and I even cancelled my membership to this church. The only connection is I work there. Jesus said, how should I describe the kingdom of God? What story should I use to illustrate it? It is like a mustard seed planted in the ground. It is the smallest of all seeds, but it becomes the largest of all garden plants. It grows long branches, and birds can make nests in its shade. Mark 4:30-33. In other parables, including the sower, birds represent Satan. So some interpret these verses to mean that the devil easily takes root within a church community once it gets too big. We've seen corruption in mega churches before. Joel Osteen and Mark Baker, for example. Really interesting that your personal experience seems to also support this notion. Deleted. As a child, my glees were $300 a pair and my eyes were worsening, or I had the plastic frames which, mind-bogglingly, are common again today, and they crack at the slightest thing, so I'd be getting new ones every year. Then I went 10 years as an adult with outdated prescriptions, because I couldn't afford a random $300 at the drop of a hat. I was shocked as hell that I learned that online places like Zenny Optical could take a prescription and get me a pair for super cheap. I still had to source an eye doctor that had decent rates. Best one I had was only $25 for an exam, but even so it wasn't nearly as bad as I feared. And I could get several pairs of glees and even prescription sunglasses, which I'd never had before. Pretty much any software you use is jacked together spaghetti with no tests and has a long list of known bugs. I used to work fast food. Not gone a day where every single person I work with had tried marijuana. But that's lame, so let's take it up another step. In reality, the majority of people come here for work because we have nowhere else. Either we grew up in poverty and never had a chance to go to college, we commit crimes in our youth that we regret, or struggle with drugs and alcohol. In my Northwest state, a raise from minimum wage to $10, like we got because of the virus. We're essential workers and are awarded for working in a crisis. But when you go to a fast food restaurant, just think about why we're there. Yeah, we made mistakes. Yes, we're facing consequences. But they aren't bad people. My co-worker, who was an ex-cartel member with face tattoos, was nicer than most of the elderly white customers I met. Has twice the man as many people I've met. The people here are coming for a second chance. PLZ, let us have it. THX for all the love. I read every reply. This is some real chiz people need to hear. A lot of people don't understand how easily you can get looked over with any sort of anything on the record. Copywriter. Most of the articles you read on the internet are written by us. We have no idea what we are talking about. We get the topic, Google it, and reword other articles into a new one. All we have to do is make sure we include a few SEO words. I've written articles for HVAC companies, movie and TV reviews, tons of different merchandise sales, and so much other stuff I've forgotten. If it's a blog post online, it's likely fake. Edit. Want a good example? Go read the descriptions on Netflix. The more vague the description, the more likely the writer didn't watch it. If you pay real close attention, you can tell that a lot of the descriptions were written by the same person. Edit 2. For everyone asking, this is how I got started. Domainite. We notice. Our athletic department has strong-armed financial aid into finding money for athletes who have sub-2.0 GPAs, are constantly busted for drugs, and get in trouble all the time, which leads to them being ineligible for athletic money. But we want to keep them on the team, so they find other money to keep them here. I actually learned from a professor at my alma mater that coaches were given administrative access to transcripts and would go in and change their athletes' grades after the deadline. None of the professors knew and wouldn't bother to check pass grades they had already finalized and submitted. It blew up eventually, and the new president had to take away the coaches' access that they should have never had in the first place. Every stereotype you've ever heard about retail and sales staff doing everything in their power to make a rude customer's life hell is 100% true. Make sure you spend the most money. Done. Send out the worst version of the product. Done. Put you on hold for an hour while they have a chat and a break. Done. I gotta admit, as I work in customer support, if the customer is an a-hole, I will go strictly by the routine. However, if they are calm and happy, I sometimes make a few tricks to speed things up or possibly reduce the next invoice amount. Library workers are all a bunch of tatted up punks outside of work. You usually can't see the tattoos because we cover them up with cardigans. We also will ignore parental restrictions if their children have their own library card, meaning if a parent tells us her kids can't read a certain book or watch a certain movie, we will disregard it and check it out to them anyway. If parents want to control what media their child consumes, they shouldn't give them their own library card. One librarian I know is super sweet and talks about kittens. You'd think she'd be riding around in a Honda Civic or a minivan, but instead rocks a ducking Camaro and hangs out at the bar on weekends. I've worked in fast food, and it is a sad reality that many workers will come to work sick because they can't afford to lose wages. One year, the flu was going around town, and I think our restaurant was ground zero. You know when you are checking out, and the store offers to round up your total and donate that to a charity? Well, the company is using this to pay into their own charity with oversight costs etc, who then pays into another charity. They are also then using this charitable donation as tax offset. You are much better off choosing a charity yourself and saving the 5-10 each time and donating it at once to the same place. You get a small tax offset and know the money is going to a place you have researched. I figured that was the case with donating to charity at the register. Sometimes the customer isn't right. That's bullshit. I want to see your manager. Call center. If you're being unreasonable, me and my coworkers are definitely roasting you in the work chat. An actual business practice. I can't think of any. It's pretty straightforward. I used to work in a call center. My first week there, I go through the script calling on behalf of college. Is Mr. this person available? And the other person was under the influence of something and responded with nah, they out ducking bitches. This may come as a surprise, but your vet tech is not only in it for the money, primarily because we are paid very little. Please stop yelling at me. I love the vet techs at my vet and always try to be extra nice to them. They always seem stressed, but are also always super nice to me and my kitties. Thank you for what you do, and I'm sorry some people are jerks. One of my cats peed on my favorite tech about 6 months ago when she was hospitalized, and I still feel bad about it. She took it in stride though cause she's awesome. Sometimes I forget to indent my code. #INDENTATIONERROR. Expected an indented block. Lots of performing musicians don't ever really get over stage fright. Many of them take beta blockers to help with nerves. Although it's less about the mental side of it and more the fact that you physically can't perform if you get so nervous that your hands are shaking. That's what beta blockers help with. You'll probably still feel anxious mentally, but any physical effects like shaking or sweating will be gone. Not really a dark secret, as there's not usually bad side effects of beta blockers, but I guess some people might see that as cheating in a way. Personally, I find it kind of inspiring knowing that lots of people struggle with the same thing as me, and there's a solution that isn't just suck it up and deal with it. I take beta blockers for anxiety. It's amazing how much it helps. I used to have panic attacks, but if my heart isn't going crazy then I don't get the panic attack. Those donate now, and your donation will be double / triple / quadruple matched, or we only need 10 more donors. $5,000 more from your zip code. MLs are all lies. But they work, so we keep sending them. I always wondered about that. Like, number 1, where do all these rich donators come from? And 2, why are they playing games with their donation when they could just donate their up to amount and be done with it? It's kind of relieving hearing they're mostly just marketing ploys. Teachers chiz talk students as much as students do. Don't get me wrong, we love you and want to see you succeed, but your loss are mahals. I had some of the sweetest teachers in high school. It warms my heart to know that they were probably cussing out a picture of the clam hole in the teacher's lounge. Overwhelming majority of international trade is done by incompetent, poorly trained and uneducated staff from poor countries that is also exploited. Government checks are all corrupt, even from Western countries with generally low corruption. This is by design. It's a miracle that ships don't collide and sink constantly. Biotech produces a lot of waste. Can confirm, and it's all kinds of waste. What really got me is when we as an industry decided that single use was the way forward. See, it means we don't have to have expensive cleaning systems and time off of production to clean. So vessels to make and mix stuff and tubing to transfer it is all one-time use plastic. It really makes me feel like a fool every time I scrupulously drop a plastic bottle in recycling, because the impact we have as individuals, even if every individual human did it, doesn't compare to the damage done by corporations. Your apartment building is probably held together with duct tape and wishful thinking somewhere. Neither tenants nor landlords ever want to pay to fix things properly, though why would tenants pay to fix things at all? I don't own the building, so I'm not going to be investing in it. The military usually has no idea what's going on at all, and when we look all uniformed and ready to go, it's because we've been waiting on standby to figure out what to do next for 7 hours. I forgot where I heard this, but on being deployed as infantry, it's long periods of waiting interrupted by minutes of intense violence followed by more hours of waiting. P-hacking in science. This just means the practice of fishing for significant findings, rather than setting out to determine if your original hypothesis holds true. Normally you would come up with a hypothesis, design an experiment, test it, and then afterwards test for significant results. People p-hack in order to find comparisons that are significant, even if those comparisons weren't the ones they set out for in the first place. I don't think this is necessarily dark or questionable, but I feel like it would be frowned upon. Also, sorry for any mistakes I'm on mobile. I work at a bookstore, major chain, and sometimes we have these things called strips. Basically, it's a book that the publisher wants off the shelves, but doesn't want to take back. So we tear or strip off the front cover, log the cover, and throw the rest of the book away. And it's just not underground books either. I've seen it happen to popular books that we simply just have way too much of. Sometimes employees can take the coverless book home, but most of them just get tossed. One time, I took over $1,000 worth of study aid, think act, sat, app, etc. books that were gonna be tossed and donated them to my HS teacher that I still talk to. It's sad to think these books can still benefit people, but we can't do much about it. Worked for Jones Fabric. We did the same with our magazines. Publishers just wanted the covers mailed back to verify we didn't sell them vs stolen. I'd let my employees take the rest of the magazines and any of the crafts included with them. Occasionally if I had a number of a few, I'd donate boxes of them to a camp I used to work for. That contractor you hired is paying off the labor and past due vendor accounts from the last job with the down payment you gave him for this job. I worked for a home improvement store and there was so much sexual harassment in management to employees that no one in upper management cared. If you reported any sexual harassment you got retaliation in return. Less hours, no promotions. Calling hours didn't work because the managers knew who'd call corporate and nothing was anonymous. It was wild. Deleted. It's a shame. Minor league games can be fun as chess. The stakes are super low, and I've never had a bad time at a minor league park. When you order pizza, if you have unpopular or toppings that are not picked, often you are most likely eating a mixed bag of fresh and spoiled ingredients, due to pizza kitchens having to refill the toppings containers every week. If the management does not force kitchen staff to empty them out and clean them, you will end up eating rotten and rancid meat and veg. Edit. I didn't think my highest rated comment would be about my sinful pizza past. For those who questioned how this stuff is allowed / could happen, the district I worked in had management that was very intermingled and interchangeable, where managers and GMs would go from store to store on a weekly basis. The uncleanliness is more of a established tradition at this point than anything else. On top of that, most of the employees are young, potheads, no offense, and older dudes and a few young women trying to get quick cash. If they aren't told to care, they won't. So when leadership chises the bed, things can still keep running, especially if the district manager's weekly check-in is him coming in and making sure everyone is wearing a uniform, and then he walks out. Edit. Thank you for the cake day wishes, D. What are the most uncommon toppings? I used to manage a nation supermodel for about 5 years. I was frequently brought along when she met with other celebrities, usually Western, sometimes other Asian. I was still teaching her English as I'm native, and I'm fluent in her language, to ensure she understood everything and didn't make any major cultural faux pas. I don't know if this qualifies as dark pressy, but questionable for sure. I won't name names, but many of these actors, musicians etc. also have other businesses and brands. They would sit down and offhandedly formulate what fashion/trends they would start soon, so that they could have goods waiting to be sold to accommodate people participating in these trends that they, themselves, started. They would also plan out propping each other's business plans up by reinforcing the trends with appearances, comments to fashion magazines etc. The first time I heard this kind of talk, I thought they were just being full of themselves, as they are very prone to do anyway. And then I saw the effects of the talks happening a few months later, over and over. This is what we'll have people wear in the fall. Started production yet? Next week. Send me the sample. When it's ready, I'll make sure my demographic is on it. Your concert in New York City is in June, right? Yeah, I'm a medium. Here's my manager's number. She'll make sure I get it in time for the show. Edit. Spelling. I sent this. The 7 gay warlocks that dictate the rules of fashion? Jokes aside, that's the point I always understood. That fashion was just bullshit to make people feel better by buying chiz. That's fine. I do stupid chiz to feel good, like eat ice cream a lot. I don't know if it's a secret exactly, but many clinicians in the mental health field still refuse to work with clients who have a borderline personality disorder diagnosis. Although there's a pervasive belief that BPD isn't treatable, there have been at least somewhat effective treatments for decades now. In particular, DBT is pretty effective at reducing rates of suicide, which people with BPD are at hugely elevated risk for. I think it's pretty questionable. It would be like if the majority of doctors refuse to see patients with arthritis because there's no cure for it. Edit. I do appreciate the lively discussion that this has generated, but because of the number of comments I'm not going to respond anymore. If you're offering a rebuttal, I can almost guarantee that someone has already offered the same thing and I have already responded to it. I'm getting the same responses over and over for the most part, and I don't have time to answer them individually. Just to put a different perspective out there about this, mental health is a really broad umbrella. BPD is not the arthritis of mental health, it is much more serious than that. A better example would be that it's more like a heart issue. Personality disorders often involve complex trauma and require a very well developed clinical skill set to treat in a way that really helps a client the best. Clinicians I know who specialize in BPD are more like surgeons. They are super skilled, have invested a lot of time in their training, and love doing that specific type of therapy. I wouldn't want my GP trying to do surgery on me just because they are a doctor, and I wouldn't want a therapist who isn't specifically trained in BPD treating me for it if that was my diagnosis. Any therapist can treat stress, not every therapist can or should treat BPD. Mental health is really complex. You can know an incredible amount about a clinical issue, like anxiety, but very little about others. You can be well versed in a clinical approach that works awesome for some types of issues, but have no training in others. Most therapists are going to have a certain population or clinical issue or population they specialize in. DBT is awesome, but it's also a lot of training to know how to do it well enough to use it with clients sexually, especially ones who might be at risk of harming themselves. Training in DBT is a long-term professional commitment. You don't become good at it just reading a book or taking a one-day SU. If you are a therapist and you haven't been specifically trained in treating BPD, then you absolutely should refer that client out to a therapist who has, so that they can get the best possible care. Clinicians trying to treat outside of their area of competency is unethical and dangerous for clients. This is especially the case with BPD, where clinicians run the risk of harming their clients by exacerbating the BPD if they don't know how to skillfully handle the relationship issues that come up in the therapeutic relationship as a result of treatment. It's the same with complex trauma. Sure, every therapist should know how to handle some trauma, but there is a difference between simple trauma that most of us have and complex trauma, and you shouldn't be treating complex if you aren't specifically trained in it. Most therapists are going to specialize over time to work with the issues they feel drawn to the most. This is totally normal and a good thing for clients in the long run, because it results in clinicians who become really skilled at treating certain issues. A lot of new therapists though are working in environments where they have to be generalists, and that can be anxiety provoking. This is especially the case in treatment centers where clinicians are usually overworked, understaffed, and expected to be miracle workers by administration. There is a reason that most seasoned therapists are going to move out of those types of roles as soon as they can. I think the response many describe about therapists in response to BPD is often a therapist's own anxiety showing in those moments. One last thought, it's as much a systemic issue as an individual clinician issue. US healthcare system isn't really set up to actually care about making people truly well, unless you are paying top dollar for that. Most counselors outside of private practice are pathetically paid and overworked. If they are there and aren't brand new to the field, they are doing the job because they really do care. The system grinds therapists in these positions down to the bone until they either leave the field, go into administration, or specialize in a private practice. When you are in that sort of position, sometimes a complex case thrown on top of everything else just feels overwhelming. Maybe clinicians shouldn't ever let that show, but they are humans also, and often humans who are doing everything they can to help as many clients as possible, but having to work with little support, insufficient training, and administration breathing down their neck to do more with less. This is the situation managed healthcare tends to create. It shouldn't be that way, but it is in a lot of places. Hope this was helpful in getting a perspective on this from a different angle. We got paid extra to clean at night in one particular area, and we aren't allowed to ask questions about the chiz we clean up. I know it sounds like it's straight out of a creepypasta, but it certainly feels like that sometimes. Like, what would you be cleaning up? As a kitchen hand, I'd often have to refresh the squid and mussels in a fine dining restaurant. That basically meant go through all the old smelly seafood, clean it in salt water, and keep on selling it. I don't order seafood in restaurants. That's illegal here and would get a restaurant shut down with a fail grade in my country. The amount of good food that is thrown away, it's pretty sickening. Alarm/camera tech for residential and business. The monitoring center you pay for is a lie. There is a pretty good chance no one is responding, or it is being sent to a call center handling tons of calls. But that doesn't matter, because the police won't usually dispatch for unconfirmed alarms, if at all. The gear is stupid cheap and easy to install. I literally had one day training and just looked everything up on Google or YouTube. It's all on there, including install and override codes for most systems since the 90s. Most of the stuff they sell you is pretty worthless. You are better off monitoring and servicing your system yourself. You can get it all on eBay for pennies, what you'll be charged by your company. Even used can be reprogrammed and set up fine. If you really want to be secure, get a good dog. But tons of you are locked into years of contracts over basically $30-40 sign worth of gear. We just keep the protected by ADT stickers up that the last owner paid for. I figure our house only has to look like more of hail to get into. Be careful if you work anywhere they make you put on a dog and pony show for clients. It means management isn't afraid of obscuring the truth from anyone. A lot of the companies that are doing the background checks that are required you pay before you are employed look the other way, while your information is siphoned off to servers in Russia and China, paying your information indirectly to the governments of said countries. Some financial firms' data, when you sign up for an account with someone like PayPal, for example, will end up being shared with over 80 financial institutions and governments, which is something that such firms would rather you not fully understand, even if they eventually admit to it by way of their 2S. I knew it, thank you good sir, this confirmed my suspicion. I work in quality control. There are acceptable levels of insect parts that can found in manufactured food and be okay by the FDA. I mean, as gross as it seems, food isn't just food for us. The real world is a dirty place, and not everything is grown in a test tube. Deleted. Your friendliest person knows, or has access to know, just how much time you spend working vs slacking off. True. But here is the real secret. We just don't care. 911 SAPs, public safety answering points, have the capability to locate your phone pretty much whenever they decide they want to. Your phone does not even need to have dialed 911 recently or ever. Some SAPs have rules governing this, but they all have the capability should they choose to exercise it. By capability, I mean that cell phone companies will hand over this data based on a verbal request. The only thing stopping the government from tracking your every move is that they choose not to. My mom works for the US Nation Park Service as a dispatch. It is an absolute pain in the ear for her to get your cell location through the provider. Even if they are doing a search and rescue, the provider would sometimes say no. Though if she called the right people in the Air Force, they would just give it to her right away. Also, most of the SARS I'm aware of her helping with ended with a dead body. The entire industry would collapse if you people just learned how to Google. Until then, we shall continue making you pay to restart your computer. I have worked in vet since 2013. I have this habit, especially when owners don't want to be present for their pet's euthanasia, in which I give their pets chocolate, pieces of my meal, meat, bread, cheese, even onion/garlic, or the best wet food from our pantry prior to them being given the drugs that help them pass. They don't suffer from the damaging effects of those foods if they are being euthanized minutes after. I like to give them a taste of something they would never get to try otherwise. Of course, I would never do this unless the pet was already en route to the room where the procedure would take place. This is just beautiful. Oh my, you watched until the end? That's fucking awesome, dude. Thanks for watching.